You're not limited to simply retrieving and displaying data from your database. You can very easily update it too. In this lesson, you'll update some rows in your database using LINQ. To begin, open the Spark sample file from your Sample Files folder. And open the code behind file of reports.aspx. Now remove all code from the using statement. And add the following code to retrieve a single invoice record from the database. Invoice my invoice equals data dot invoices dot single invoice lambda invoice dot invoice ID equals 1882. Now we'll add some code to output the details of the invoice to the page. Label report.text equals my invoice dot invoice number. Label report.text plus equals an HTML break tag, and label report.text plus equals my invoice dot invoice amount dot toString. Now view the page in your browser. The invoice number and invoice amount are displayed. Close your web browser now. We are now going to add a button to the page, which we'll use to update the invoice. First, open reports.aspx in Design View. Now add a button control to the page just after Label Report. Give the new button the ID Button Update Invoice, and the text Update Invoice. Now add a click event handler to the button. We are now going to add some code to update the invoice record. First, copy the code from the page load event handler and paste it into the button update invoice click event handler. Now remove the 3 lines of code that set the value of label report.text. Next, we'll add code to change the invoice amount property of the invoice. My invoice dot invoice amount equals 123. View the page in your browser and click the Update Invoice button. Nothing appears to happen. LINQ won't update the database unless you specifically tell it to. Close your web browser now. Now add the following code to tell LINQ to commit the changes to the database. Data.submitChanges. This tells LINQ to update the database with any changes you have made. Note that LINQ can only send updates to your database as long as your data context object exists and has not been disposed of. The data context object keeps track of the changes you make to your database objects. If your data context no longer exists or has been disposed, you will no longer be able to update your database by calling the submitChanges method. View the page in your browser again. And click Update Invoice. The value has now been updated in the database, but this isn't apparent as the updated value isn't displayed on the screen. This is because the code in the page load event is executed before the code in the click event. You learned about this in Lesson 3.2. To retrieve the updated value, your page load event handler will have to run again. To make page load run again, refresh the page by using your browser's refresh button. As you can see, the updated value is now displayed. Ideally, you would store the code that retrieves and displays the invoice details in a separate method that is then called by both the page load and button update invoice click event handlers. Of course, this approach wouldn't be very efficient, as the method would be called twice when the button was clicked. You'll discover a more efficient solution in Lesson 12.8. Close your web browser now. As you can see, simply changing the properties of your LINQ objects and then calling submitChanges allows you to update any of the values stored in your database. You can also do this with collections of data by using a for-each loop and then calling the submitChanges method once it has finished. Even if you have a large collection of data, you still only need to call the submitChanges method once. The LINQ data context will keep track of any changes you make and commit them when you call the submitChanges method. You've now completed Lesson 10.7. Update database records using LINQ.